Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co hostess, Anna, and we've got an episode today that is a cut above. I'm here with.
Hey, Grieflings and Frightlings, it's Margaret, and thank you for listening and watching. And this is this is one of my favorite horror movies. Anna, is it one of your favorites? Maybe, maybe not.
Well, so I actually, when we decided we were going to talk about it, I watched it for the first time. And I'd only seen like clips of it before. So I think it's great because it's different, it's unusual, it's not the same. And sometimes Margaret and I talk before we record, and it feels like so many movies are just like recycled ideas and plots and genres and subgenres. So this one I think is great because it's different, and you need that, especially in the horror genre.
Yes, so we are talking about one of my favorite. I'm going to call this a revenge
Mm-hmm.
horror film, even though if you watch it, as soon as Anna tells you what we're talking about, it doesn't present as a revenge horror.
Mm-hmm.
It presents as this movie that's unfolding and you're trying to figure out the mystery of.
The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And this is fun because as death professionals and persons who are certified educated in death, our perspective is probably a little bit different than the viewer's perspective. So just want to give you guys a heads up on that. This film does contain a lot of body horror. Woohoo! And also talks about the not so great history in New England in the early days of the United States, in terms of the hysteria associated particularly with Massachusetts. There's also the setting. It primarily takes place in a funeral parlor and morgue. Animal death, as well as metaphysical related death, metaphysical violence. I think I might be missing something. Um,
Ritualistic torture, ritualistic abuse, talk of rape, talk of kidnapping, talk of trafficking. So if you haven't watched it,
mhm.
stop now, go watch it, because
Yes.
we're diving in. Because as the mystery of who Jane Doe unfolds, they think that they have the body of a young woman that has been trafficked
Mm-hmm.
and is being sexually trafficked and has been tortured, as they're like, her wrists are broken, her ankles are broken. There is extensive
Yes.
vaginal trauma as they're talking about all of this until, as Anna points out, we get to know she actually was tortured because they thought that she was a witch. So that was, it's a very fascinating movie. Like, I was like, why, if you think she's a
Mhm.
witch, why would you rape her? Like, horrifically. Like, they imply that this was extensive vaginal trauma. What did you think?
Right. So for me, I thought once again this was a really great take. We all know my perspective on religiosity in film. It either jives with me or I get very perturbed about it, depending. I think that this film was really well done. Historically, not completely accurate. I've been to Salem a bunch of times. Really, in high school, studied a lot of the history, and I was disappointed that they didn't make it seem as though the lungs were impacted by water torture, because the water test was a huge part of the witch trials in Salem and surrounding areas. Basically, they throw you in. If you floated, you were a witch and you died. If you sunk, you weren't a witch, but you drowned. So it was kind of a 50-50 crapshoot. But I did really enjoy a lot of the theme. I think it was interesting that they mentioned Lazarus and a lot of these different characters. Any of you who are new here, I did go to a Catholic college for my undergrad. Myself am not of that religion. If you are, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. But as part of the educational course, we're required to take multiple philosophical and theological courses. So from the historical, technical application of those texts, I really did appreciate what was mentioned, because I thought that was a great way to do it. Um, I really enjoyed what was happening with the corpse during the autopsy. The fact that the eyes did not look how they were supposed to post mortem, the fact that there was no pooling, no bruising, rigor mortis was not accurate with the timeline, all of these things that are hinting towards what we eventually find out. I just really enjoyed the technical application in many ways. What about you?
Oh, yes. I thought, yeah, like you're watching, you're like, why is the body not doing these things? And I think you touch on then we have the interaction with the dad and the son. The son is so curious. He's like, well,
Mhm.
why this? Why this? And the dad, I love how he's like so scientific mind. He's like, well, I've seen this one time before.
Mhm.
This has happened one
Yeah.
time before. He's still kind of normalizing. Well, maybe it's because of this, maybe, but they're both like trying to solve this
Mhm.
mystery
Yeah.
together of what happened to Jane Doe, who she is.
Absolutely. And it's fun. Like you said, the characters are so different. Like the dad's like, I gotta nail down the COD before we leave. Whereas the son's like, well, let's talk about her. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out like, the environment she was in or X, Y, and Z. And so it's really fun to kind of watch them go back and forth. I also really appreciated when they refer to the wife and mother that had died. Um, they're going through their own grief. And the fact that they do mention, she seems so happy. We never thought that she would do this. So we know that she completed suicide. And, a smile hides a lot, right? So we're talking about every day, today, walking, breathing, living, what people are going through. But then you look at the body of Jane Doe, and this pristine corpse is hiding so much. And I thought that the parallel between that statement and what's going on with this autopsy was so smart. And I really I enjoyed that. I picked up on that and I was like, oh, that's very smart to include in the film.
Yes, and I love how you touch on that, right? How mom and Jane Doe are connected. And
Mm-hmm.
as you also touch on their grief, I tuned more into the cat, like the symbol
Family.
of like when we're
Yeah.
bereaved, where we're like holding on to, and even dad's wisdom, right? Where he
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like, I kept the cat, your mom left the
Yeah.
cat, and this is just something that happens. I feel like dad, maybe being in the death industry,
Mm-hmm.
really had this healthy relationship with death. Kind of like, death is
Right.
what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my cat to suffer. So this is where the
Yeah.
son, he's young, he's still on his grief
Mm-hmm.
journey. He's still trying to figure
Yeah.
things out. And we can see that dynamic play out
Mm-hmm.
throughout the movie, which I really
Yeah.
appreciated. I just loved the relationship between the
Mm-hmm.
two of them.
And you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people kind of struggle with the coup de grace, just because in a situation like with Stanley, that was the humane thing to do. You couldn't let him suffer, but it's still heartbreaking. And um, in a broader sense, you never know how strong you can be and what you're capable of until you have to do it. Um, and I'm not talking about giving a coup to an animal. I'm just talking generally about what we experience in life. And, I think caregiving is a great example of that. You read a story or you see something on TV and you're like, I don't think I could ever do that. And then a friend or loved one becomes gravely ill and you're there every day preparing their meals, changing their bedclothes, helping them bathe. You don't know how you're doing it, but you are and you're getting through it.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And I love that tie in, right? That caretaking. And we see that with dad. He is a caretaker. He is caretaking to these bodies after they have died. And he's very thoughtful. And it feels like he's trying to mentor
Yes.
his son into how are you having, and his son does in his own way. His son comes with the curiosity. I'm tending to these bodies because I'm curious. And as Anna touches on caregiving, part of caregiving people, especially end of life, is that who were you? What made
Mm-hmm.
you? Tell me your stories. Let me have that so those can live on, which his son's really holding on to with mom. And we can see dad is like, it's done. And this is how I'm going to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like that the dad and the son are so almost loving towards the corpses. I think that the death industry in general, a lot of us get a bad rap. Um, it sometimes, and we've talked about this before when I tell people I'm a thanatologist, explain what that is. They either run away or they open up about an experience that they've had, which I prefer the latter because it's meaningful that I've just told you what I do and you feel comfortable enough to talk about this. Let's figure out what might be helpful to you. But death creeps people out. And I think that there are these ideas of like these sinister, funeral parlor owners and they're making dog food out of the bodies and just all these wild ideas that just simply are not true. And um I would say the majority of people in the death industry, whether you work at a funeral home, you work at, in the supply chain of materials at a florist, you're a psychologist, you're a thanatologist, you are a palliative care administrator. There are so many different death industry positions. We are there to make life more comfortable for our clients and to those that have been touched by our clients. When it comes to working with a decedent, this body belonged to, at least from my perspective, a spirit, a soul, to a living being. That is not the time to be crass or crude or disrespectful by any means. And I would venture to say that working in the death industry, being in the death industry gives a much deeper appreciation for life.
Thank you for sharing. And I love that perspective. And I feel like you honor dad, right? When son's girlfriend comes to
Mm-hmm.
visit and she's like, oh, I want to see a dead body. She's curious. And he's like, no, no, you don't. He's like being
Mm-hmm.
protective. Like, no, I want to
Yep.
protect you from death. Where dad's like, no, like,
Mm-hmm.
let her see. And like,
Yeah.
they give her the choice. And I think she picks, again, this movie has a lot of themes of
Mm-hmm.
suicide in it. She picks the person that, right? Is that the one? The person that shot themselves in
Yeah,
the
the one that shot them.
mouth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and even dad's kind of humor in
Mm-hmm.
that. And we could touch on how often in grief or
Yeah.
people in the death industry or just life in
Mm-hmm.
general, how we can have what's considered a morbid sense of humor or
Mm-hmm.
even working in grief. And I think Anna has had this experience. People will often say too soon because we will lose
Yeah.
somebody and then we will make some off colored, offhanded
Mm-hmm.
joke about them that feels out like other
Yeah.
people like, oh, you can't say that about the deceased. And it's like,
It's like, well, I
no, they're
just did.
my
So,
deceased or
yeah.
right. It's how like we cope, like
Mm-hmm.
humor. If I'm looking at a dead body, having some
Mm-hmm.
humor helps breathe life into death that we're holding.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, grief is something that we see a lot in this movie, metaphorically. It's you don't know when it's coming, where it's coming, but it's going to come for you. And it's something that's very far reaching and it can transfer from situation to situation, location to location. It's a byproduct of our own experiences. So, of course, Jane Doe, I mean, her grief and pain is so strong that the only way for her to cope with this is to pass it on to others who really, we could say, are innocent bystanders. Anyone that she comes across is being impacted by this deep, deep pain and grief that she has been through. And I think sometimes when we're dealing with grief and loss and we're bereaved, that unintentionally we do that. It's just don't come near me, don't talk to me. And if someone does, whoever they are, we're trying to send out these vibes, or maybe we're not. Maybe, well, like Jane Doe, she's trying to give hints. She's bleeding when you're cutting her. If she's a corpse, she shouldn't be doing that. Um, if you look at me and I kind of just go like that, I don't smile, I don't address you, I don't say hi, that means I don't want to be approached. But if you come up and approach me, poke the bear.
Yes. Ooh, that's such a brilliant time, right? That she is grieving. She's like, leave me alone. And we can see her fury that
Mm-hmm.
she has gotten to a point where she does not care
Yeah.
anymore who comes across her. She has been hurt so bad. Makes me wonder who else in her life was hurt
Mm-hmm.
so bad to where all her choice has been taken. She has been violated in horrific ways. And
Mm-hmm.
now she's like, no, nobody gets a chance to
Absolutely.
survive me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder for her if that's, like, we don't know history unless people share
Yeah.
history, or if Anna's grieving, she's got to give me some clues. She doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to tell me her whole grief story. That's how we honor things. Like
Yeah.
the Salem witch trials, the treatment of witches. If
Mm-hmm.
you listeners, you look into the treatment of women and when they were thought to be witches, this is like a horrible
Yeah.
history for us. And the only reason we get to keep talking about it is like with Jane Doe. She's like,
Yeah.
you will not forget. You will not
Mm-hmm.
forget this happened to women. And so I wonder, and I don't know what you think, if that is part of her fury, part of her revenge is, I have to kill innocent people, or else others will forget about the innocent people who died before these innocent people.
Mm-hmm. I think to some extent it is. I think it's also the comfort. Like it's become her ritual to do this, right? So she gets taken from place to place and essentially like destroys anything in her path, right? Because Stanley gets hurt and we know it's her. Um, it's to the point where she's so deep into this copacetic behavior that it is a ritual. It's just repetitive. She needs to do this. It's not just to the point where she's grieving and she doesn't know how to express it. She needs to do it. It has become a need. It's an urge. It's not just, I need to figure this out. It's part of who she is now. And, for those that are bereaved, that are grieving, that are navigating these sorts of journeys, it's incredibly important to identify supports and services that work for you so that your pain does not become part of your daily ritual.
And what is your daily ritual? And I feel like you also touched on, when we look at Jane Doe's grief, not only is it her grief, it is a collective grief. It
Mm-hmm.
is the historical grief of Salem witch trials in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, um, probably Russia, probably
Mm-hmm.
throughout the world. I don't know the history of the whole world. And so it's that, then how do we grieve and have rituals without then being angry or then just hurting people because I hurt, so you hurt? How to say, I grieve for the experience of all the women who have come before me. I grieve for the
Mm-hmm.
experience of all the people who have come before me. And how do I turn that into grief and ritual and honoring, and not, my wrists were broken, your wrists are going to be broken.
Mm-hmm.
My ankles were broken, your ankles are going to be
Yeah.
broken. I was burned, you're going to be burned.
Yeah. And sometimes the only way, and this is kind of abstract, but the only way for someone to understand what you're going through is for them to have to go through it themselves. So, I mean, it really says a lot when you look at it that way, too. But I do wonder if at some point they would have said, okay, this is really weird. Let's stop the autopsy. Let's put her back together. If they would have made it through the night.
I wondered that too. and listeners and viewers, I'm really curious because, as I think you can tell in the conversation Anna and I are having, this is so complex and it's so
Mm-hmm.
rich. You could hear between us. We are also trying to figure out
Yeah.
what was the meaning. Could it be this? Could it be that? And it
Mm-hmm.
relates to this, but it also, because that's one of the wonderful things about this movie is it makes you think, and then, ooh, I see the grief here. I see the trauma here. I see
Mm-hmm.
this here. What would I do with that? Because, like you, I wondered that too. Like, well, if they just stopped,
Mm-hmm.
would she have? But I think the cop also made, like, at the end, I think it's the officer that says, nothing good comes from anybody who's come to contact with her body. So that led me to
Yeah.
believe that he, I don't know what he did, maybe
Mm-hmm.
traced back a little bit to, like,
Yeah.
this, wherever this body goes, death goes with
Yeah.
this body. So I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
they were cursed from the time that she came in or if they actually had
Right.
hope.
Yeah. And then I'm kind of wondering too, like, if he's figured this out, like, isn't he gonna try to like work to put her somewhere, like bury her in like consecrated ground or hollow ground or something, like whatever could help her, right? And I'm like, couldn't somebody just seance her up and be like, what can I do to help you, you know? But there I go
Because
again, wanting to help everyone. Um,
no, I think that's like so beautiful, as I think in our cast often touches on how often in horror movies there are people that have the chance to say, what can I do differently? Because this is
mhm,
the pattern of Jane Doe's body. Because here again, the officer's like, get her out of my district. I don't
yeah.
want anything to do with her. And not this, do we need a priest? Do we need a shaman? Like, who do we
Hmm.
need to put
Exactly.
this body to rest? And often I think that's what this movie brings up is, what are our cycles that we're caught in, and how do we go ahead and say, wait, I need to do something different.
Absolutely. Totally agree. I love how you said that too. Very well put.
Yeah. I am curious. So the song Let the Sun Shine In
Hmm.
plays on the radio several times at the end.
Hmm.
What do you think the significance is of that song? And if you need a reminder, I actually jotted down some of the lyrics because I was curious.
It actually, it was comforting to me because I grew up hearing a very similar tune. Um, so I enjoyed it. I think that it was probably something that they sang or, is meant to have been sung at the time to protect kids or, to protect people. But yeah, I grew up hearing something very similar and so even though it was totally out of context, I felt very comforted hearing hearing this song. How did it make you feel?
I love your optimistic take on it. I thought, like you, it's probably something that she
Mhm.
heard. And for me, I thought, did she have to like listen to this where they like smile
Mhm.
or the devil's gonna get in? You have to keep smiling.
Mhm.
And yet the devil still got in. People accused her of the devil getting in, and
Mhm.
then she was treated
Yeah.
like the devil got in. So I was like,
Mhm.
she had no way out because they're telling her, you just smile and you're good.
Yeah.
And again, if we apply that to life, how often do we say, I just have to smile? I'll just
Yeah.
smile and I'll get through.
Well, and think about it too. Once again, back to the mother's suicide. Um, she seems so happy, right? A smile hides a lot. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and that's even grief. How often do we put on our happy face and just pretend we're okay when we're just feel like we are much like Jane Doe rotting away inside? And, you know, hey, if you're out there and you are smiling and you feel terrible on the inside, you don't need to feel that way. There are groups and support services out there. If you feel like you are just at your wits' end and you have nothing to give at this point, whether it be to yourself or anyone else, please call 988. There are people that are trained specifically to help you. It is anonymous. You do not need to feel ashamed. Many workplaces also have behavioral health services that you can access. There are so many resources. Many towns have 24/7 walk-in mental health clinics. It is nothing to be ashamed of. You deserve to receive help and address what is going on with yourself and to live a positive, prosperous, enjoyable life.
You don't have to smile. I feel like that might be Jane Doe's messages. Whether you're
Mm-hmm.
smiling or not, trauma is going to happen, grief is going to
Mm-hmm.
happen, life is going to happen. So you don't have to smile.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, for the film, I have to ask, who do you most relate to?
In a lot of ways, I related to the son, like it just his
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. Ooh, what about this? What about this? And like wanting to go deeper and wanting, because that's just how my brain works. And yet, that scene with the dad when he whispers to her, take me instead, let
Mm-hmm.
my son live. As a parent, I was like, I could see myself doing that. And then I was devastated, right? Because she's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take you. You're going to die thinking that you saved your son. And in
Mm-hmm.
the end,
Yeah.
he's not saved. And I was like, that just
Yeah.
broke my heart. And I think it reflected on, for a lot of people, maybe not even as parents, as spouses, as friends, how we will be like, I will suffer. I will take this hurt and pain
Mm-hmm.
so that the person I love or care about won't get it.
Yeah.
So then again, that goes back to my original thought is that everybody Jane Doe knew
Mm-hmm.
got pain. It didn't matter if she was like, I'll take the
Yeah.
pain because the people she loved got hurt too. What about you?
I relate to Stanley, the cat, um, because, stuff's starting to get weird. And Stanley's like, okay, this is not an ideal situation for any of us to be in. I am here, but I am going to try and find a safe place for myself so that I can assess the situation and figure out how to help everyone else. Unfortunately, it doesn't go so well for Stanley, um, because he kind of gets it first. But I feel like his intentions were pure. He was like, okay, let me figure this out. And I think that's for me. I'm like, okay, this is the situation. I'm going to take the immediate actions necessary, but then I need to assess how to move forward. So just kind of that um, thought
It seems
process.
like Stanley is that like emotional support. Like Stanley was an emotional
Yeah,
support
like
to the
here.
son and the dad. And so I can
Mm-hmm.
see you being like, because our cast where we really talk about deep stuff, you're always reminding the listeners and the viewers, like, you have supports, you have these. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like you are that like support cat.
Well, thank you. You know, it's funny. I always say that I am my dog's emotional support human. so, so maybe. But yeah, I do want to talk about too, as you were mentioning, you know, the dad dying and then the son. I feel like in a sense it was almost compassionate because she knew everyone was going to die. So at least letting him go with the thought that what he was doing was the right thing. I'm sure when he's like hanging out in the spirit world and then his son pops up, he was probably like, I didn't expect to see you right away. But at least he went with some sense of security. So in a sense, I feel like that was almost compassionate on some level. Um, I don't know. I I want to know more about Jane Doe too. Like I want to know what happened after her immediate expiration. If there were things going on with her corpse after she died and that imprinted and that's why, because let's just say for instance, like I'm gonna pick a random year. All right, nobody come for me. I know the Salem trials were at a different time, but let's just say for instance 1724, right? It's 2024. That's 3 centuries. So for 300 years, has she been doing this? Or did something unleash recently in the past 50 years where she's started doing this? You know what I mean? So I think that's just a question that I had watching the film.
I love your take, right? That she was doing something compassionate. Like she knew anybody who comes across her body is going to die.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to torment them like she was tormented. So giving dad that moment of compassion when he showed her a moment
Mm-hmm.
of compassion. Was she like, okay, you've given me compassion, I will give you some compassion too. I
Yeah.
will. She tortures him, but that's because he's saying, let me take your pain. She's like,
Yeah.
okay, here's somebody showing me compassion.
Mm-hmm.
I will return it. I will give you my pain and I will spare you from your son's death.
Right.
And like you said, like, was she unleashed? We don't know. And then I was like, I have not seen The Witch yet, but I've heard about it. I'm like, could that be like a precursor to Jane Doe? I think different filmmakers, I'm like, in this whole like context of like the witch experience. And
I need to see that too, actually. Yeah. So maybe we need to watch that and do a cast on it. A lot of mixed reviews with that particular film. So I think it'll be interesting to see and talk about our perspectives. But yeah, I think that the witchy thing in general, historically, like you mentioned, a lot of people practicing the dark arts are frowned upon, and or even the light arts. I know several people who are light workers, and they do not always get favorable reactions from general population. But it's interesting to me, like now, witches are like portrayed on TV and in movies as these like powerful people, like witches and warlocks and wizards and sorceresses and sorcerers are like so powerful, but historically they've been feared, they've been treated with disdain and distaste and disgust. So it just the idea that that the truth of reality and what we're seeing in media are kind of perpendicular to one another.
I love that you bring that up, as like now witches are romanticized. And I know you haven't seen Haxen yet, which is like a 1920s documentary. I think it's Swedish, and it's all about witches. And so essentially in the dark ages and historically, as a woman got older, they were just assumed that they were witches. They were tortured, they were murdered. Men, children associated with these older women often received the same fate. And so that, say, historically, right, this is how women, men, children, it really didn't matter, were treated, mainly older women, because they're old and disgusting, so they have to be a witch. Was like the gist. To now, like, oh, you've got power, like they've been romanticized. That's a really interesting dichotomy you bring up.
It is, and it's funny you say that. My neighbors, so her grandkids spend a lot of time with her, and they're adorable, the sweetest kids ever. But I love like Halloween and scary stuff, and usually come like the 1st of September, I start decorating every year, and there have been several times where the kids have been out and they've been like, "Oh, the witchy lady's out decorating," and they get excited. But it's just funny because you're right, that adjective, witchy is such a fun, popular, intriguing thing now, and years ago it would not have been.
Yes, you remind me, like when I was a kid, there was like this old kind of beat down house.
Mm-hmm.
It had like old glass bottles in the window. And so me and my friends assumed a witch lived in that house. We were terrified of this house, like cross the street, like, oh my God, don't go by the witch's house. I don't know. I'm sorry to whoever lived in that. I don't know where that like came from, or where in our collective consciousness as children we associated a rundown house with tall grass growing and bottles in the window would be, on that we were scared that for us that was part of our collective unconscious, was that. And so listeners, viewers, collective unconscious is this concept that we all share this collective knowledge base, and it is often what feeds our conscious mind. So if I'm afraid of a witch, it is because my ancestors collectively and all the other ancestors, peoples of the world, have this thread that witches are bad. And so then
Yeah.
that's why like, often like, I don't know, I'm afraid of this because there's symbolism that often has been ingrained.
Oh my gosh, maybe my ancestors were burned at the stake because I've always been like, oh, witches, friends. Oh. That's actually really, when you think about it though, like things that you have always gravitated towards and the collective unconsciousness, like, whoa, what if this is like
Yeah.
just like generational grief? What if this is ancestral knowledge that we're just super subconsciously aware of and inheriting?
Yes, because then as an adolescent, I wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
a witch. Like my
Oh, remember
tween
The
years,
Craft when it came out?
oh yeah, I was like, I'm going to be a witch when I grow up, and specifically, I wanted to control the wind. So, and then it's like, what was that like in the collective that
Right.
was
Yeah.
feeding me as a woman, like being like, nope, like as a kid being afraid of a witch, and then moving
Yeah.
into puberty and then wanting to be a
Mm-hmm.
witch, and then thinking about collectively, there's a
Yeah.
lot there. Witches are scary when you're a kid, and then when you are moving into your power,
Yeah.
as Anna touched on earlier, witches are
Mm-hmm.
actually powerful.
Absolutely.
And
That's
Anna already knew that, even as a little kid. She wasn't
obsessed.
like afraid.
So weird. Actually, they're in, I'll have to show you sometime. They're in another room in the house, but when I started working with clay when I was super little, one of the first things I made was a witch sculpture. And when I started painting, one of the first things I painted, I titled it Witches Night Out. And it's snowing, all blustery, and there are witches standing there like this trying to keep warm. I was little, like just old enough
So
to
you
hold like
were
a brush.
a witch in the past life.
Evidently. I mean, I don't know. But my parents, I will say they let me start watching horror movies when I was like 4. So that probably has something to do with it too. Like, I think it's just the fascination with the obscure and the morbid and the macabre that kind of translated to that. And Elvira, well, she still is, but as a child, she was one of my primary idols because I knew like I'm never going to look like Barbie. I'm not blonde, I'm not blue-eyed, I'm not tan. But then I saw Elvira and I was like, well, she's pale and funny and wears a lot of makeup. I want to be like her.
Yes,
So
I think
that's
we've
probably,
touched on her before. As
yeah.
for us as
And she has that like witchy
children,
vibe. Yeah. So that could be
yes, oh,
probably
I
a big
loved
part of it.
staying up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like yeah, we both love Elvira. She was
Mm-hmm. She's awesome. Shout out to Cassandra Peterson. You are loved. Yeah,
yes,
for sure. But yeah, I think that it's a great film. I actually am going to probably watch it again because I feel like there's stuff that I didn't catch the first time. But I think it's really great. If you haven't seen it and you've listened to this cast, I encourage you to give it a watch. Let us know what you think. If you have seen it and you've picked up on other details or you have different opinions than what we've mentioned, let us know too, because, that's the great thing about film. It's art, it's subjective, and that's the beauty of it. There's something for everyone. We can agree to disagree or we can agree to agree. But it's great to share our perspectives and thoughts and ideas and listen to those of others too.
yes, yes. Let us know what you think. I'm with Anna. I This movie is just it's a well done. I know we've been focusing on the story, even the direction, like how this film was shot, just gives you this overall ominous feeling. Like from the first scene, you're just like something is not right. You need to stop what you're doing. You need to close the door. You need to return the body. Like you just need to. And Anna talks brilliantly about this, right? That kind of thing in horror movies where it's like you're being told like don't do this, and this movie is all like it almost was
Mm-hmm.
like everything they do you're like don't, and how it's
Mm-hmm.
shot just builds that tension when you're watching it where you're just like
Yeah.
you're sealing your fate right now, stop as soon as she started bleeding, no,
Mm-hmm.
don't do it.
Absolutely. Well, and how many times does our gut tell us don't do this? it's time to exit stage left or whatever the situation is. But we keep pushing, we keep pushing. So that's a great way to think about it too. Like, when you have this systemic biologic reactions, listen to them.
Oh yeah, when you get that somatic gut
Mm-hmm.
response telling you, you don't even so often our rational brain of like, well, I don't have any proof that I won't have fun. Doesn't matter. Your
Mm-hmm.
body has already, and the more work you do with your body, the more somatic awareness you have, the
Mm-hmm.
more you know, oh, this is my anxiety, this is my depression, this is
Yeah.
my unease. No, this is actually my gut. This is actually my gut saying,
Mm-hmm.
don't do this. And so, even watchers, listeners, maybe when you watch the autopsy of Jane Doe, maybe you go in and you say, ooh, right there, my gut would have already been like, nope, I'm leaving this house. Nope, I'm returning the body, so that you can get that awareness of, oh, I do know my no's. I do know my
Mm-hmm.
yeses and a noses. I feel horror can be so therapeutic.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great therapy. It is. And it helps us in ways that we don't even realize. Like so many other forms of art and so many other genres of film and television. It's what you gravitate towards. And I was
Mm-hmm.
actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking with a friend the other day, and they enjoy film for escapism. Whereas for me to get something out of something I'm watching, whether it be horror or another genre, I want that visceral reaction because that's what pleases me. That's what fills my cup. And I think that both are great. However you feel when you attach to something that you're watching that you enjoy, the most important thing is that you're getting enjoyment and you're getting something out of it.
Yes, ooh, yes, I completely agree. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be horror. If it's rom coms or dramas or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, we can help ourselves process so much. And even like Anna said, even if it is escapism, sometimes we need that escapism. And oftentimes it's just being aware of your intent. Why am I watching? Just because I want to escape. I want a good story. I actually need some processing. And sometimes the beauty of it is we watch and we're like, wow,
Yeah,
that hit some nerves and I have some stuff to process.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to process talking about this film.
Yes.
So, guys, gals, everyone out there, however you
Peeps.
identify, people that we adore, always know that there are supports and services out there for you. We come to you with these ideas and hope that, like we said, you get something out of it. If you have any ideas or any other witchy things you want us to talk about, we are more than happy to do so. Let us know your ideas. Don't forget to like and share. And until next time, drink that bruja brew and eat those coffin cookies. Bye.